Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
The average dental practice has anywhere from 1 to maybe 3 or 4 staff working at the front. And what do we call the staff working at the front? Well, unlike a lot of positions in society, you have a welder, they weld. A drill press operator operates a drill press, or a host hosts, right? What do we call the staff at the front desk in a dental or medical office? We call them front desk staff. They're not necessarily named after exactly what they do. They're named after the area in which they work. And what does the conventional front desk staff member do? Well, a little bit of everything. Scheduling, filing insurance, patient walkout, benefit verification, and so it goes. Now, when you have several people all doing a little bit of everything, not really responsible for anything in particular, what happens when something goes wrong? You have a big opening on the schedule. Who do you talk to? Who's accountable? Who owns that opening and is ultimately responsible for filling it? In most practices set up like this, everyone. And, I ask this question at seminars. If everyone is responsible for everything, who is responsible? And the answer I always get from the seminar attendees is nobody. So to maximize productivity and efficiency in any area of any business, it's critical to divide labor and responsibility. People have to have a zone that they can control and are ultimately accountable for, that they own. So how would you do this with the front desk in a dental practice? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode of Dental Business RX, how to organize your front desk to increase production, efficiency, and ultimately profitability. My name is Jeff Blumberg, and I'm your host. And I'll be joined this week by Sabri Blumberg, our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, to provide some insight in how to do this in your practice. Now, you've probably heard Sabri if you've been listening to the podcast for any length. She's been on several different episodes. She is in charge of all technical delivery here at MGE. She's met with, helped build practices with thousands of dentists. And if you're an MGE client, you definitely know who Sabri is. And I think we have you all connected over there, Sabri.
Yep. I'm
awesome. Okay, good. So I think we just roll right into this, if that's all right with you.
Sounds good.
Because you're meeting with, you tend to meet with most new clients.
Yeah.
At least once.
Yeah.
So all right, so I'll just go ahead and start with my first question, which would be, how would you organize the front desk for an average new client? So here comes an average new client. How would you organize the front desk?
Well, it depends,
Okay.
right? It depends on their setup.
Okay.
Right? So there's usually 3 different setups I see.
Okay.
Right? It's dependent upon the size of the practice and also the amount of attention that the doctor places on the front desk. Mm-hmm. It could either be like, I have an office manager.
Sure.
Right? And that office manager is not what we at MGE would call a manager. At MGE, a manager would be somebody who's is an executive responsible for the profitability of the dental practice.
Right. They're running the business.
They're running the business, right? For the doctor. Right. These are not those kinds of managers per se. What they are is they're really competent staff, or maybe people who've been there a long time, mm-hmm. or maybe people that they trust the most.
Sure.
It's like there's different reasons why they are called to the office manager, but they run the front desk, and then they have a few people working for them that are helping them.
Like
run
how?
The front desk. Like, for example, the office manager is responsible for everything on the front desk, like mm-hmm. All the main things that the front desk is supposed to provide for the business.
So scheduling, collections, etc.
All those things, sure. Right? And then these people that are hired to make it more possible for the office manager to do that. So they do the filing, they do maybe answer the phone, they maybe do insurance verification, but they're doing little pieces of all these different positions.
I see.
That the office manager is really responsible for.
So they're kind of like office manager assistants almost.
Almost.
Okay.
Almost. And it's just called front desk personnel.
Okay.
So, obviously there's problems with that particular, setup because, you have one person controlling everything. It's inefficient, right? And unreasonable that you're going to expand that way.
Okay.
Right. So that's one setup.
Sure.
Right. Another setup would be check in and check out.
Okay.
Right. That's a
And just to be clear, you're not recommending any of these setups. These are the
No.
setups you're seeing with new people when you first meet them.
No,
good.
none of them are correct. Some are better than others. Obviously, the worst scenario being we all help each other.
So what I described to start the episode.
Exactly. And it's shocking to see how common that is, actually. It's fairly common to see that. And in certain cases, it even gives them tremendous production, like even practices that are doing really well financially.
Yeah.
At least their numbers look really good.
Right.
Have setups like this where I just have multiple front desk people doing everything. We all answer the phone. We all do scheduling. We all do reactivation. There's usually one person in charge of the accounts receivable or who files the insurances and such, right? What they're not seeing in that scenario is how much business is walking out the door.
Right.
And usually that is why practices like that have good numbers. They don't have a good profit margin
I see.
because they're losing so much.
So they're high volume, they're productive doctors, they're really good at what they do, but
Yes.
you have a practice doing 400 that should be doing 8 or 9.
Correct. And the profit margin is not where it should be, and that's why they're here.
Got it.
Right? They're working very, very hard and usually a lot of hours. Not for the income that they expect they should be making. So that's another scenario. The check-in, check-out scenario is the scenario of the person that is the most organized, so to speak.
Okay.
And it's better than nothing because at least responsibilities are divided and it creates some form of efficiency between the responsibilities, right? It's a more efficient way of doing it. The problem with that scenario is that functions from the same position are divided amongst two people. And therefore it becomes absolutely impossible to staticize
Interesting.
that particular setup. So you never have a way of measuring their productivity. You never have a way of measuring whether that person's actually accomplishing what you hired them for, right? When you're hiring people, and I do want to get into this, right? We have the tendency to think, or like not we, but there seems to be this idea that when you pay somebody in dentistry, you are paying for their time.
Right. I think that extends beyond dentistry. I think that's pretty prevalent. You're paying for, I'm here, whether I do a good job or not is immaterial. You're paying for my time.
Exactly. And that's the viewpoint of the person employing them and the viewpoint of the employee.
And just to be clear, you do have to pay your staff. You can't not pay them, but
No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But you're not paying them for their time.
Right.
You're paying them for the time they spent getting you what you are employing them for.
Right.
Right. There's a reason you hired them and you employed them and you gave them money because you were trying to buy something from them. When you give somebody money, you're buying something.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think people don't look at this, that if you're hiring a scheduler, you're not just hiring someone to schedule patients, you're hiring someone to give you a full, efficiently booked schedule. That's what you're paying for.
You're buying a certain amount of production.
Right. Right.
Right. Now, how do you know whether you're getting that? Because production is the stat of the scheduler.
Sure.
Right. Now, how do you know if you're getting that?
Well, you got to have a stat.
If you don't staticize it.
Yeah, good point.
And if the person doesn't understand that that is what you're buying from them, right? And I mean that we can get into a whole discussion about that. I don't want to get too far off the
It's
beam.
supposed to be practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Okay. But I do want to say
I know.
this.
We usually go over. We went over the
Even
reception
when
episode.
somebody keeps a statistic, did we go over this? Like when somebody keeps a statistic, they have to understand that this is their statistic. This is what they are expected to control and produce, not keep track of for you.
Well, let me do this. Let's catch up to where we are. So you went over, we have 3 different scenarios.
Yes.
Okay. So we have I'm going to repeat these. Correct me if I'm wrong here,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So you'll see a newer client and they have really someone they call their office manager. They don't fulfill the full office manager role as we describe it at MGE.
Sure.
They eventually, in a lot of cases, do when we train those office managers.
Yeah.
And they have a bunch of helpers.
Yes.
who are called front desk staff.
Yes.
So that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is where you just have everybody all over the place, all doing a little bit of something.
Yeah.
And then scenario 3, you have this, you've seen folks come in with a checkout and check-in setup.
Correct.
Someone does check-in, someone does check-out.
Yeah.
And the liability of that, as you described, is you have different positions spread across 2 different jobs.
That's correct.
It's a little bit hard to staticize then at that point.
Correct.
Right.
The actions necessary to control the statistics are divided amongst multiple people, and therefore it becomes impossible for either one to control that stuff.
Right. And I do want to talk about statistics. I do have that on my list. What I wanted to ask you first, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So you'll have to keep listening, folks, if you want to hear Sabri talk about statistics. But so I've just come to see you. I'm a new MGE client.
Yeah.
Let's say I have an office manager and the office is doing, I don't know, 140 a month.
Okay.
So I have this one person at the front that I call my office manager, who really is like the front desk manager.
Yes.
And I've got 2 helpers or front desk staff up there with him or her.
Yeah.
Okay. So how would we organize that setup?
Well, with those numbers, the minimum staff complement I'm going to want is I'm going to want a receptionist.
Okay.
I'm going to want a scheduler. And I'm going to want a either treatment coordinator or financial coordinator. Usually we can fit those 2 together in a practice doing about 140 because the doctor's presenting cases as well.
Now, I know in a lot of cases, the office manager ends up becoming the treatment coordinator
Correct.
initially.
Correct.
So would that be the setup? So we're going to say, okay, we have a receptionist, a scheduler, and is the office manager holding on to the financial stuff then at that point? Or are we
Correct.
hiring another person?
It depends. Like, I mean, if it's possible from a workload standpoint, right, the office manager would do it.
Okay.
But you have to examine not just what do our numbers look like, you have to also examine how much is walking out the door.
How much lost opportunity? And I know
Yes.
you spent a lot of time with clients on this.
Correct, because that's where most of their profit is going. I mean, they're making enough money to cover their overhead.
Sure.
And usually their overhead is significant if they're employing people and they're doing marketing and they're paying for a nice facility and good materials and good labs. Like they're paying for everything. But for these things, and it requires a certain amount of money to make their overhead, and they're making that. Their profit is walking out the door.
Right. Because they're already meeting their expenses with whatever they're making.
That's correct.
Now, and I want to double back here for a second. So now I
Yes.
have 2. I'm making notes. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
the stats we got to talk about. And I wanted to double back. You mentioned a receptionist and a scheduler. Now,
Yes.
for most of our listeners, if they're not an MGE client, that means exactly the same thing.
Understood.
So could you clarify that for the listeners?
Yeah. So a receptionist is responsible for the flow lines of the organization.
Okay.
Right. So they're responsible for making sure that all incoming traffic is handled properly. People and everything, like the patients are where they should be going, the phone calls go where they should, everything's handled correctly. They're also responsible for the amount of contact that occurs with your patient base.
Okay.
And I don't want to get too deeply into that because I know that's a different concept for dentists, but in business, that is quite a common concept,
that's
right?
normal.
That's a normal concept for your receptionist to be responsible for that.
Yeah, we've never had our receptionist here at MGE schedule clients for training or seminars.
Oh, absolutely not.
Total separate job.
Total separate job. They're responsible for communication in and communication out
Right.
of the organization. And usually they're incredibly weak. I'm not talking about receptionists, I'm talking about the dental practices. They're good at answering the phone. Well, that's actually not entirely true.
They're pleasant when they answer the phone.
They're friendly when
They're
they
friendly when they answer
answer
the phone. They could use some work on conversion, but anyway, go ahead.
We want them to be effective.
You're right. Want to be
Right.
effective.
And I know we did this whole episode about
did.
that, so I'm not going
That
to
was
get
our
back
first
into
episode
that.
together.
Right. So
Yeah.
reception is definitely not an entry level position in
Right.
a dental practice or in any business for that matter. But, so they're responsible for all incoming traffic, which is usually where they do that quite competently. They don't know that they're responsible for all contact with the patient base, all outgoing traffic, which is that particular thing drives income in a business.
Yeah, and that is a whole episode in and of itself. I'll let you sum it up. But the problem, just so you folks know, when Sabri and I get going, we used to do a 2-hour live stream every day during the shutdowns, during the whole COVID period, and we always ran out of time. So we could go on for hours here. That's not a problem.
Absolutely.
And I have to control it to some degree.
Okay, fine.
I mean, it's not you, it's me too.
Yeah.
Because you make some excellent points, right?
So reception meaning a true receptionist as defined in a business definition, not somebody who answers the phone.
Right.
Right. But a good receptionist is absolutely, and that actually does her job and knows what her job is or his job. Right. Is absolutely worth their weight in gold.
Okay.
They drive so much business into the practice.
Now, do you, because I just may as well ask this, right? So I've got the manager and two people, and we're saying one's going to be the receptionist.
Yeah.
The other is the scheduler.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing just to highlight, you said the receptionist also isn't just taking incoming calls. They're also making outgoing communication, whether that's letters, mail, or whatever from the practice. And that's important, which
Referrals.
I said we could do a whole other episode on that.
Yeah.
But so we've got just this basic organization you've set up so far. We've taken this front desk manager who we're now going to turn into a real office manager.
Correct.
And we've taken these two other personnel and said, good, one's going to be the scheduler.
Yeah.
And one's going to be the receptionist.
Yeah.
Would you ever do it where the receptionist and scheduler are the same person?
I can.
Okay.
I can do it that way. It kind of depends on what kind of practices it is, how much insurances they have,
Got it.
how much traffic they see, like how many patients they see each day.
Right.
Sometimes I have to put the scheduler and the receptionist together and separate those out later.
Right. As the place gets
As
busier.
the place gets busier. But yeah, I mean, in a smaller business, people wear multiple hats.
That's true.
Right. So yeah, you can put them together if you want to. But in a larger practice that does 140,
Yeah.
but the amount of incomplete treatment that's in those practice and the amount of patients we're losing due to no follow-up, I'm probably going to be upset if we don't separate those out because of the amount of money we're losing by not doing that.
And I know it's hard. And it's funny. I'm thinking back to 15, 20 years ago. If I said a practice that was doing 140, that always had a similar look about it.
Yes.
Because, I mean, obviously it would depend on the fee structure based on where they were located. Right. But now that can be so different.
Oh, yes.
Because there could be a private practice with zero insurance accepting assignment doing 140. That looks completely different than a practice that has tons of HMOs, union plans,
Or
this, that,
even
the other.
PPOs these days. PPOs pay garbage these days, right? So if they're not out of PPOs yet, usually you need to see some people.
Right.
In order, and with that profit margin on the PPO or lack thereof, it becomes even more important that they retain their patients and that their conversion is good because they're already spending with their PPO participation 40% of their income on marketing, which is the worst marketing on planet Earth. So here, if you're still in PPOs, please put together a plan to get out.
I keep saying it.
Yeah,
You
got to get out, man.
You got to get out. So, all right. So we've taken that one scenario. OM and two staff. One's going to answer the phone. And again, could I invite them if they have a scenario like this to contact you if they have questions?
Of course they can contact me. They can always email me and I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
Okay. Because obviously everybody, like I was just saying a second ago, it's so different now.
Yeah.
As far as what a $140,000 practice with three people at the front could look completely different.
Correct. Because I have seen 140 a month practices with one hygienist and one doctor.
Right.
Fee for service, not very busy.
Right. And they got
Why?
one
Because
or two people.
they get normal fees.
Right.
They don't have these huge write-offs.
So what I was going to, could I invite them to email you at Sabri B? You were just saying they could email you, Sabri B at mgeonline.com.
Yes.
If you have a particular question about your scenario, we decided we wanted to record this. We're going to do our best to give you some ideas or some pointers, but obviously your situation may be completely different than what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And
So if
that's
that's the
problem
case-
with the question.
Right.
Like we're having a podcast like this is
But there's never a problem with the podcast.
obviously not. But if there ever were one, what it would be is that there's so
Right.
many different scenarios.
If someone were to do that.
Yes.
All right. So that's one scenario.
Yes.
Okay, so now I guess the question is, you got the OM and the two staff here. Let's chase this thing down a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you decide which one's the receptionist and which one's the scheduler?
Depending on personal skill, right? So that could be because of their personality or familiarity with the area. Let's say somebody's been scheduling successfully for a long time. They may not have the best personality to do their job, but they have a track record.
Sure.
I'm not going to remove them off the schedule. right? I would have to be insane.
But instead of a lot of people scheduling at that point, you're now basically taking this one person and you're saying, let's kind of walk this through if we
Yes.
can. So let's say I'm the client.
Yeah.
You've just told me we're going to make your front desk manager your office manager, and they're going to handle treatment coordinator and financial duties, right? And I have my receptionist, and here's what you've told me what the receptionist has to do. And we're going to make so-and-so the scheduler. Okay. So now, how am I going to deploy that or do that when I go home? Like, what instruction do you give me? How do I make that actually a reality?
So obviously, you need to make sure that you have a clear understanding and what functions go with what duties.
Okay.
So you don't just confuse your staff.
Sure.
So you have to have an understanding of these are the functions that go with reception, answering the phone, doing the filing, all the outgoing communication out of the office, the letters, the reactivation letters, the recall cards,
Sure.
asking for referrals, scheduling family member referrals, like, hey, do you have somebody in your house that currently doesn't see a dentist? Yeah, my husband, whatever. Good, let's get him scheduled.
Sure.
Right? Like those are all things that the receptionist can do.
Okay.
Right. And there, and then, then you have the scheduler. Scheduler obviously would follow up on incomplete treatment plans by scheduling consultation appointments. Obviously make sure that there's enough production on the day. Also be responsible for the hygiene schedule, but usually just recall, not necessarily reactivation. Usually don't have time for that. Things like that. And then your office manager then would be responsible for the overall collections by managing the AR, billing, right, over-the-counter collections and selling treatment plans, helping the doctor do that.
Got it. Now, let's say the office gets busier because now we have this, we're organized a little better. So there's regular communication going out of the practice. So you'd have me go home and meet with these folks, and then I get it going. Things start to improve, right? My stats go up. I'm selling better. Our collections are up by 40, 50,000 a month. Our volume is up. We're doing more marketing. So the place is getting busier.
Yeah.
And then, so now my office manager is A, being the office manager.
Yeah.
And then B, they are handling my financial coordinator job.
Yeah.
Right. And that's assuming that the insurance isn't completely throttling him or her.
Yeah.
Right. And C, they're being the treatment coordinator.
Correct.
So now at what point would we say to the office manager, look, you need to fill either the financial coordinator or the treatment coordinator position so that you can back off a bit and be more of a manager?
When we're starting to lose business as a result of it.
Okay.
So we could lose business as a result of it in different ways. One, they're totally not capable of being the office manager, which means there's no coordination between the front and the back. There's no oversight or foresight on what the statistics are going to be doing in the future. We're not making sure that the actions necessary in order to create a good month next month are being taken because the office manager is too stuck in now. In order to create a future or make sure that the future is good.
But what about, so let's say it gets real busy and they're getting really tied down into insurance, right? And they're getting tied down so much that they don't have time to do other things and we're losing business, as you say.
Yes.
So we hire a financial coordinator.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And we continue to produce even more. But now I find the office manager is spending, because we're doing a lot of new patient business, let's say, and consultations and treatment presentations. Now the office manager is spending 3 or 4 hours a day in treatment consultations. Does that start to become a problem?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So there comes a point where you no longer have an office manager. You just have a treatment coordinator or a salesperson, right? So now usually the office manager is really good at that, or they should be really good at that. Right.
Which is why they tend to be the one doing it.
Correct. But then with their office manager duties, the treatment coordinator job has a lot more to it than just close what is there. I mean, they are responsible for the income of the organization. They are your salesperson.
Right. Yeah, we have an episode on that one. You remember that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So they can listen to that episode, which describes that treatment coordinator position. You're right. We do have a course on DDS success.
Correct.
That you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the treatment coordinator position is an incredibly important position in any business.
Sure.
Right? So usually an office manager being the only treatment coordinator means that we're losing a lot of income.
Right. So then I'm getting
we don't have a manager.
Right. So I'm getting to the point where I'm getting busier and busier with treatment. Now I have to hire a treatment coordinator.
Correct.
So now I've got a pretty well staffed out complement.
Now you do.
And it kind of gives you, I think this helps in a way, obviously, since every situation's different, you got to kind of explain it to, everybody's situation's different. So it would be more on an individual basis how this is handled. But this gives folks kind of a little bit of an idea how they do it.
Yes.
Right? So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So let's say we've made this person the scheduler, and we were talking about statistics earlier, and I know you had something you wanted to say on this about like owning the statistic, right? So, if we've made this person the scheduler, when do I give them their statistic and how does that work?
Usually immediately.
Okay.
Because you want to immediately get a person thinking with, I'm not just here to put in time.
Okay.
I'm not just here to do these things. These things that I am doing are leading towards something. And, you have to believe in the brightness and ingenuity of people a little bit. That if you tell them, this is where you're going, and they understand how to do their job, they will figure out the best and most efficient way to get to where you want them to get to.
Got it.
So you have to let them know where somebody's going before when you put them on a position.
And what statistic would I give my scheduler?
Okay, your scheduler would always have production.
So this is production of the office.
Overall office production is the job of the scheduler because the scheduler does two things. They control the amount of production that's being done by all providers by using their time efficiently, and they control the amount of sales opportunities on the schedule to provide future production.
Okay, so here I am the scheduler.
Yes.
I have this statistic of production.
Yes.
All right. So now, how does that work? So let's say production is down this month.
Yes.
So, okay. What then?
Well, there's a whole program we do at MGE to teach a manager on how to handle that. That's a really big question.
That was a bit loaded, I noticed.
Yeah, that was totally loaded. But just for simplicity's sake, if I have to give
Explain the power program to me, please. And everything having to do with staff management. But just for everybody listening.
Just for simplicity, if the person truly owns the production statistic and they are the scheduler, and they are involved and interested in that position, then the easiest thing to do would be to ask them, what are you going to do so that this doesn't happen again? And make sure that they come up with a sensible plan. Give the problem back to them. Let them be responsible.
Right. And I know you talk about this with clients a lot because you've seen it kind of play out two ways. Talk a little bit more, if you could, about this idea of owning the statistic versus having a statistic.
Well, it was interesting to me. There was a time when I was visiting a lot of clients' offices, guys that were on the program somewhere, and there was a certain program I was doing where I was in clients' offices, and these are clients as I'd been talking to. The power client managers had been talking to them, and obviously.
Yeah, they were doing great.
They were doing great, and they had statistics, and they were managing by statistics, and their staff had been assigned their statistics. We did everything we were supposed to, and the client was too, as far as they knew.
Sure.
But too often what I ran into, and this is not an everybody, but what I did run into was there were more clients than I was comfortable with that had staff that were keeping statistics without realizing that this was their statistic. It's not part of your job. It's part of my job to clean the waiting room, straighten up the waiting room, and to keep track of the amount of production. It had about the same significance for them.
Wow.
Versus, no, you don't understand. Your job security, your longevity with this particular practice, how much money you make, your bonuses, and the way I view you as an employee is completely dependent on what that stat's doing, because that's why I'm hiring and paying you. You are supposed to control this.
So it's like they're being a scorekeeper as opposed to a player in the game almost.
Yeah.
So I keep the production statistic for the office manager as opposed to I own this production statistic and I'm responsible for influencing it.
It's my job to report where it's at.
That was what they thought their job was.
Right.
Interesting. As opposed to actually influencing whether that statistic was up or down.
Correct.
Interesting.
No, this is your stat. This is yours.
Well, it shows you something in that, look, everybody can always do everything better.
Of course.
And these were clients, because I know some of the clients you were seeing, they're statistically in the top 1% of dentists in the United States.
Absolutely. They were doing great.
But then, there's always things that you can improve upon. It just goes to show.
Well, it shows you that even a little bit of organization goes a long way.
That's true.
And when you do it absolutely right, you create something magnificent.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
All right. So last question about this particular thing, because we kind of hit the statistic question. So let's say I go back and I'm that same scenario we talked about in the beginning. I have my front desk manager who's going to become my office manager.
Yeah.
And then two helpers. and one of them isn't really suited for a particular job.
Yeah.
So let's say,
Let's say I have a very introverted person that I put on my reception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we do with that?
Well, it depends on what other jobs I have open, or if what has happened a lot is that I have people that are personality just like, I have a person that's super introverted that's presenting treatment plans, or a person that's afraid to talk money presenting treatment plans.
Or they hate sales
or they hate sales. It's like,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with this person. That's just not their particular skill set.
Sure.
So it'd be pure insanity. That's like me. I throw up at the sight of blood, making me your assistant.
Right.
That's insane, right? It's complete misutilization of my skills. People like that can be utilized. Let's say they're really good with numbers. Okay, fine. Stick them in insurances, right? Like, this is a good person. You need that done. Let's say the insurance person is really outgoing. Move them to be your scheduler.
But we would want to find somebody from a suitability perspective, because I've seen on the other flip side of that,
Yes.
where someone will decide that someone is not suitable for a position, even though they've been doing it.
Well, if a person's been doing it, then that's what I said earlier.
Yeah, that's why you brought that point up, which
If
is interesting.
somebody's been doing it, and even though they're quote unquote not suitable, it's not who we would have picked for it.
Yeah.
The statistic always trumps
Right.
whatever opinion we have.
Yeah, it's performance.
That's right.
Yeah,
The
interesting.
performance trumps the opinion always.
Right. So obviously we kind of went real basic.
Yes.
Because, we're realizing as we go through this, especially, that it's so different for everybody. So what I recommend to those, listening from home, actually, there's a few things you can do. You and I did a whole thing kind of like this, but it was long and it was on video. We call it the Practice Jumpstart. It's sort of like we interview you to find out everything you talk to a new client about.
Correct. I mean, this is obviously a very brief
Yeah, this is extremely
overview.
brief. But you can check that out on DDS Success, our online platform, ddssuccess.com. We'll put a link in the description, right? And if you're not a subscriber, you can get a free demo, and you can check out that Practice Jumpstart, because you get an idea of all these things that Sabri talked about at length. Right. A couple other things they can do, as you mentioned, they can email you if they have a particular question about their specific situation.
Sure.
I think that'd be great. But otherwise, I think this is great. I think gives, the idea of being able to do this is important. This was, as you said, a simplistic view of it.
Yeah.
But it's something that they should really be looking at. And I like that you pointed up that one of the biggest things is what they're losing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's so hard to spot, because it isn't there.
Right.
Right? It's like the money isn't there, so nobody recognized that we lost that money.
And when you do, I know when you meet with a new client, you're with them for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
Not on one shot, right?
No.
Might be over a couple of days. But how long do you spend on calculating what they're losing?
Usually at least an hour.
Really?
Right, because ordinarily these overheads are already so taxed.
Right.
That but they're spending a lot of money on things or have spent a lot of money on things that they're not utilizing. Patients, their family members that are not coming in. And I'm not talking about, that could be people that have been in the practice that are now not showing up.
Right.
But it could also be people that have never gone to a dentist or don't have a dentist. Right. That they're not scheduling. But they've paid for this.
Right.
The treatment that these patients need that we're phasing. Right. I take a look at, hygiene production. Your hygienist is not an expensive toothbrush. They are an integral part of your healthcare team, right? And so it's very important to get your hygiene functioning and make sure that your hygienist understands how to be successful in your practice. All of that. So I spend a lot of time on that.
Awesome. I think that about pretty well hits it.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Sabri, thank you so much for joining us this week.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. And, we'll definitely have you on our future episodes. It's obviously about 80 million things we could talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. And, folks, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. That's all we got for you this week. If you don't mind taking a minute to follow us or subscribe, depending on the platform that you're listening to us on, it definitely helps, and it makes sure that you keep getting notified every time we come out with new content. If you have any questions about MGE, you can always find us online at mgeonline.com. Or you can call us at 800-640-1140. We'll see you at the next episode.